Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 226 of Rush Roundtable. This is a very special debate-style episode. We are in between Test for Echo and Vapor Trail's song discussions, so we are going to be debating which one is more preferable to the fan base, Test for Echo or Vapor Trails. As you can see, some of us, well, really just me and Alex, have our 3D glasses on. If you don't put on your 3D glasses, you'll only be seeing this thing in one half D. And why are we wearing our 3D glasses? Because Joe Flaherty, the man who played Count Floyd, um, among many others, Happy Gilmore, you suck, you jackass, right? Variety of different roles, but with Rush, um, Count Floyd introduced the weapon on the Grace Under Pressure tour. He passed away recently, at least since this is the first one we're recording since his passing. So rest in peace to Joe Flaherty. Eric is still a cow, so I'm not really sure how that's going to work throughout the duration of this episode. But
Moo.
I heard drop the 3D glasses for now. Let's first introduce our master debaters. Debating for Test for Echo. On the left side, we have Ryder Hyduck and Jim Benner. On the right side, debating for Vapor Trails, we have Eric Winter and Alex Kelly. Myself and Paul Simon will be the moderators for this. I'll be reading the questions. Paul will be keeping time. Each team will have a total of 2 minutes to answer each question. They've been given most of the questions prior so that they can kind of, be somewhat prepared. There are a few questions that will be asked on the spot, so hopefully you can answer it a bit organically. And again, it's really just of course, for the most part, we all believe all Rush is good Rush, and I say for the most part because we know Eric hates Test for Echo, so we'll see how that dynamic works. Um,
Yeah.
it's really just a debate as to which album is more preferable to these guys. So this is mostly just subjective, opinionated, whatever. Um, at the end, I'll probably throw a poll on our YouTube channel for who you think won the debate, not which album do you like more, who debated for their album the best. Okay. So without further ado, you four ready? Good to go? Paul's gonna
All day, every
go
day.
when you have 10 seconds left. Paul's gonna throw up 10, two hands. Then when you have five, he's gonna do a countdown. So all right. So we'll start with the Test for Echo side. You guys can decide who goes first, which one of you goes first. You get 2 minutes per team. If you want to distribute that 1 minute to 1 minute, great. 30 seconds, a minute and a half, great. Whatever, it's up to you guys. So, as passionate as Rush fans are about which song is the best, they are arguably more passionate about which song is the worst. Subjectively speaking, which is the worst song of your album, and why is it better than what you believe is the worst song of your opponent's album? Test for Echo team.
All right. I got one for this one. So, Jim, if you want me to take this one away, I got this.
Go for it, man.
All right. So, in my opinion, I think the worst song on Test for Echo is the closer, Carve Away the Stone. Though it's not my favorite song on the album, I think there's still a lot to admire about the song. The lyrics are about moving on from the past and the challenges that arise on the journey of self-improvement. And I think there's a lot to admire about that. The song also features some really drastic changes in feel, which is where I feel it can falter a little bit. These sections of awkward transitions that sometimes pull me out of the music. Similar to my thoughts on Test for Echo, I don't think Vapor Trails closes out very strongly either. My least favorite track on the album is its closer, Out of the Cradle. While the song is really upbeat and carries the energy from the rest of the album, personally, the lyrics don't really offer a whole lot for me. And I feel like the song revisits a lot of the same musical ideas really frequently without changing up things too much. So, in my opinion, I think both albums don't close out really the strongest.
All right. You got a minute left, Jim. You
Here we
wanna
go.
you wanna say anything? You wanna add
Oh,
anything to that?
well, I had some different tunes, but I do agree with what Ryder says, right? The closers are not very good. If I had mine, I would say, and this is probably not going to be popular, the worst song is Resist on Test for Echo. I think the lyrics are really, really interesting and they make you think, but the the music is just kind of it doesn't really drive like the rest of the album does. And I think on Vapor Trails, it's The Stars Looks Down. The chorus is a huge change from the rest of the song. The song's pretty rocking, and the chorus feels a little bit empty. And Geddy is singing in falsetto, which is a really hard thing to do. So the timbre of his vocal sounds kind of, not really what I want to hear.
Well played. Perfect timing. All right, Vapor Trails team, I'll reread the question for you. As passionate as Rush fans are about which song is the best, they are arguably more passionate about which song is the worst. Subjectively speaking, in your opinion, which is the worst song from your album, and why is it better than what you believe to be the worst song on Test for Echo? 2 minutes.
Take it away, Alex.
All right. Well, thank you. I actually, for me, what I look upon as the worst song on Vapor Trails is actually Peaceable Kingdom. I was actually about to say Out of the Cradle at one point. I certainly agree with that. And as is my shtick in a lot of our discussions, I'm often tearing apart the song as far as the theory and scale and all that. But in these situations, I'm definitely going right for what's the immediate feel. Does it grab me? It's art. How does it hit me? And as I think Jim just said, there's a certain feel that, like, for me, I'm used to Rush having a drive, just this forward momentum, and many of the songs do, even some of the songs that I'm not as into. But I feel like Peaceable Kingdom and Out of the Cradle were just a little, not quite there for me as far as just feeling like this has got something going, and just grabs me by the shirt and says, "We're going on a ride." Which to me, Color of Right is what I was looking at on Vapor Trails. That one, I just same deal. I can't get into that as much. And there's a point where Neil breaks out a rim shot beat, which I just thought that to me felt so out of place. And I'm sure they consciously said, well, this is going to be perfect for it. But to me, it's just no.
It's interesting that we all chose different songs for this bit. Real quick, my least favorite off of Vapor Trails would be Sweet Miracle. I think sonically it's a little empty sounding in my opinion, and the lyrics have never especially grabbed me. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Half the World is a terrible song. The lyrics are extremely boring. The melody is simple. The part where he goes torn up photograph twice just makes me want to die inside a little bit. So there you go.
Okay, would the Test for Echo team like to rebut that statement from Eric and defend Half the World real quick?
That torn up photograph line, I can't help but empathize with you a little bit in that. But I think the rest of the song, definitely not the strongest lyrically as it seems at first, but we discussed it a lot on the Half the World discussion on Rush Roundtable. I think there's a lot more once you start peeling into it. And I think the kind of lighter up feel it brings a little bit of openness to the first half of the record, rather than being super, super hard focused in. It brings a lot of variety to the song. So I don't think it's think it's super worthless or anything like that. Definitely not the worst song on the album, in my opinion.
I agree, and I think the torn up photograph is creating imagery. Even in the graphic for that song, they have the world that's split, and it looks like a photograph that's torn. So I think it's really relating to the imagery that Neil was talking about at half of the world, like everybody wants to be the other half. So it's but I agree with what Ryder said.
Okay, just for what it's worth, if I feel there's a really powerful statement made, such as that, we'll do rebuttals kind of on the spot organically. So, all right. So we'll start with the Vapor Trails team this time. And the next question in our debate here is, what is, in your opinion, the best moment from your album? And it's entirely up to you to decide how you interpret moment.
I'll start with this one, Alex. I think I can sort of be objective with this one and say that one of the best moments off of Vapor Trails, and arguably one of the best moments from across all of Rush's discography, is Neil's drum intro to One Little Victory. I think it's one of the most iconic sounds, maybe not as iconic as, the intro to Tom Sawyer, But when it comes to Rush fans, it's one of the most iconic sounds to a Rush song. You know, knowing all the things that he went through in the prior years, all of the loss that he felt, all of the, soul searching he had to do, and then for the band to come back in with his drums just pounding away, incredibly powerful. And I can't imagine what it must have been like as a fan to experience that as the first time to be like, wow, Rush is back with these thunderous drums.
Well, for my part, I'm glad you said that because I was originally thinking of Neil's intro because it is so powerful. But for me, I wound up actually being maybe a little predictable and moving into the middle of the album and just thinking of the riff for, and I'm gonna cover Jim's ears, the riff for Earthshine, because of the fact that it is, to me, it's a really good example of heavy. And I find myself in my profession discussing, or having definitions of heavy coming at me from young guitar students, and I know that can be a generational thing. Everyone's all about tuning down, but heavy is a mood. And to me, that song is just a distinct example of heaviness, especially as he's just pushing that Les Paul through the whatever amp he's using at the time. Um, it's yeah, as I say, it also obviously stayed in the set for a little bit because it just has that punch that they needed, and that punch mid album, and also that punch that just is a newer heavy riff.
All right, Test Record Team, what is, in your opinion, the best moment from your album?
I'll go ahead and go first, I guess. We'll take turns. For me, I think the best moment in the album is, this is gonna sound kind of funny, the song Driven. It's got like most everything you want to hear from a Rush song. It's intricate, it's interesting, it has a lot of changes, it's full with odd time signatures. It moves forward, it never drags, and the differences really build. Like, I know I can't really speak so much for the other instruments, but I know, like, on Neil's part, as the song progresses, he's building his fills and they become more and more, they become different and more complicated. And there's a lot of nuance, there's a lot of subtlety in that song. And there's a little bass solo that well, we won't talk about what they did in concert, but there's a little bass solo that Geddy did. And it was very cool to hear that, because that's a little bit different. You're muted, Ryder.
Uh-oh.
There you go.
I definitely agree with the bass solo part.
Yeah.
Really like that. For my best moment, I'm gonna have to go with the intro to Time and Motion and how it kind of builds up. Already it starts off with a very like interesting time signature, very like off kilter. As it starts to slowly climb, you have these orchestral stabs kind of come in, which is, so far there haven't been a whole lot of keyboards on this album, so it's kind of cool to hear that sonic element reemerge. But once it really kicks in, and there's just this interplay of Alex's swirling guitar. You have Neil's just super, super dynamic drumming. You can tell Freddie Gruber's influence on him, right? So much in this part. And Geddy's bass line constantly moving and just kind of having this motion with it. It almost reminds me of Chain Lightning from Presto. It's just such a cool moment, and shows that Rush still has so much musical talent in this period.
All right. So on to the next question. Paul, who should we give I think we'll give this to the Vapor Trails team first. So Neil's lyrical themes have shifted from album to album, but he does revisit themes for later albums and songs. Tell us why the lyrical themes from your album stand out more than the lyrical themes from your opponent's album. Vapor Trails team, 2 minutes.
I can get started.
Vapor Trails team, 2 minutes.
Yeah. So I was doing a quick Google search before this started and I couldn't find it. Maybe I should have prepared a little bit more. But anyways, I think at one point in time, Neil has said there was no explicit uniting theme throughout Vapor Trails. I'm pretty sure he said that at one point, couldn't quite find it, so don't necessarily quote me on that. But it's pretty obvious that there are several songs throughout the album where his life experiences from the past couple years are reflected. One Little Victory, Ghost Rider, How It Is, Out of the Cradle, Secret Touch, things like that. Uh, and I think this is perhaps the album and those songs in particular where you get the most personal, compelling reveal into how Neil was feeling and thinking about things uh, throughout all of Rush's discography, especially with Ghost Rider, how vulnerable you have to be to reveal, yeah, for 60,000 motorcycle miles, I was lost and didn't know what to do. It's extremely compelling to listen to things like that, and then to come out on the outro of the album with Out of the Cradle, somewhat victorious. It's very powerful.
Well, as Getty said too. I mean, which Eric was just saying. I mean, this album Vapor Trails was not made as a this is our job. This is the next album, tour album, tour album. It was made after major life tragedies. So like Getty had a quote saying that it was not made simply for new music, but for the psychological health and welfare of all the people who have gone through a very difficult time. At that point, that just creates a flashpoint, a driving force that certainly marked a new beginning out of the cradle, if we use that term again.
All right. Good stuff. Test Record team. Neil's lyrical themes shifted from album to album, but he would revisit themes for later albums and songs. Tell us why the lyrical themes from your album stand out more than the lyrical themes from your opponent's albums, or album, I should say.
All right, so Test for Echo, the main unifying theme with this album is communication. Now, to address kind of the elephant in the room, Vapor Trails is obviously an incredibly personal album to Neil, and this doesn't discredit anything, that he went through and his experiences with the album. In a solely songwriting perspective, the reason I prefer the lyrical themes on Test for Echo to Vapor Trails is solely for the focus of variety within a theme. It's very similar to other Rush albums in the fact of, counterparts had to deal with literal counterparts, Roll the Bones had to deal with luck, so on and so forth, kind of carries on that theme. And each song kind of examines the central theme from a different lens. You have looking at communication over like radio waves and like just trying to see if anybody is out there in the world. What I talked about earlier with Carve Away the Stone, moving on through past experiences and like talking it through with other people. And what's really jumping out at me right now, especially as we've revisited everything through the Rush roundtables, is how relevant a lot of the material is today, especially with songs like Virtuality. There's a lot of very interesting musical themes that have continued to carry on, and if anything, have began to like really show that Neil was a very ahead of his time thinker. So to me, I find a lot more nuance in just like reading through the lyrics and just kind of examining all the different ways you can look at this central theme of communication.
I don't really have anything different to add. But yeah, I mean, Ryder's right. It's the central theme of communication, and it really does stand out in the songs. I mean, Virtuality is extremely explicit in that communication, and while that song gets made fun of a little bit, it is the lingo that we talked during that time period.
All right, let's give the Vapor Trails team 1 minute for a rebut. But what I want to ask you guys is, so Eric, you touched on there's themes that run throughout some of the songs, grieving, loss, life experiences with Neil. Ryder and Jim touched on the fact that there is a string of communication thematically running through Test for Echo. So can you, I may counter that in some way? Do you have any kind of rebuttal for that specifically in terms of Vapor Trails versus Test for Echo?
Yeah. I'll first offer communication. What a snooze. I mean, who cares? But I don't think the fact that there's not a singular uniting theme throughout Vapor Trails is any kind of downfall. Is there a singular uniting theme for Permanent Waves? Maybe not, but it's one of the best albums they ever made. So, I think regardless of the fact that there's not one uniting theme, uh, there's 13 songs on the album, right? So if 5, 6, 7 touch on this idea of, loss, of, finding your way through all of that and rediscovering yourself, uh, and that theme with just how personal that is, and I mean, everybody can relate to that to some degree. I think that gives it a stronger relationship with the fans than a more abstract idea of communication.
All right. All right. Two organic questions off the top here. So, questions I have not given you guys to prep for. So, the first now one of them is going to be around Test for Echo, and the other one's going to be around Vapor Trails. But you both will have the opportunity to speak to both questions. So, both teams will have that opportunity. So, the first question is: Neil modified his drum style with Freddie Gruber prior to Test for Echo. Test for Echo team, tell us why this was a positive. Vapor Trails team, tell us why this was a negative. We'll start with Test for Echo.
Jim, obviously,
All
go ahead.
right. Okay.
We'll give 1 minute for each one of these. We'll give 1 minute because these are organic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. All right. So Neil's playing shifted enough to sound a little bit different, but he still always sounded like himself. And even in his work in progress DVD, he asked the guys, because he spent a literal calendar year practicing and reinventing himself. And the guys are like, well, still sounds like you. So he still sounded like himself. He didn't change it, so much to where he was, completely out in left field. But the changes that he did make, he's sitting differently on the beat. He has a different pocket, as we drummers call it, or musicians call it. He has a different pocket. He's sitting a little bit more behind the beat, and that's creating a heavier sound. It's creating a much heavier sound to the songs and to the album. And he's got a lot of intricacies that he's using in his playing, and they really come out and they're eye popping.
All right, Vapor Trails team, tell us why that's a negative.
I think Erica is going to lead off on this one.
Passing the buck. All right. That's a tough question because I do really enjoy a lot of the drum parts on Test for Echo, especially the title track Test for Echo. I think it's one of the better drum parts he ever wrote. Um, but I do think throughout the album, uh, especially comparing it to something like Counterparts, uh, there maybe is a lack of power or a lack of energy because there's a brand new style one that he hasn't used before, where a lot of it is focused on what he's doing in the air in between the strokes rather than the actual impact against the cymbal or against the drum head. So at least to my ear, as not a drummer, I think something like Counterparts, the album right before it, maybe sounds a bit more powerful than the drums on Test for Echo.
Hmm.
All right.
With time to spare.
All right. So, regarding Vapor Trails, I'm sure you probably have an idea where I'm going with this, but the band remixed Vapor Trails in 2013. Vapor Trails, why was this a positive?
I would definitely say it's a positive because of the fact that David Botrill had a certain sense of the 90s. And as any of us can definitely attest, it sounds more open. It sounds bigger. I had personally no issue with Vapor Trails when it was released, but then you put them side by side, and I certainly was doing a little bit of that today, listening, sort of auditioning a little A and B with some of those songs. And yeah, the obviously the original mix was dark, a little too dark, and as I say, having nothing to play it off of in May of 2002, it was it's fine, it's cool. But yeah, that mix is just it's almost like your ears are opened up, kind of cleaned out, for lack of a better term, and you can just hear more notes, the dynamics. Certainly in my well, I'll save that for the next one of those forthcoming questions that Ryan will ask.
All right, Test Freckle team, tell us why the band remixing Vapor Trails in 2013 was a negative. 1 minute.
Oh, geez. I mean, I'm not going to deny that having cleaner versions of these songs, especially with the condition that the original mix was in, is necessarily a bad thing. I think it's good that these versions of these songs are out here. But alternatively, I think it does somewhat take away from the original vision of the album. There's are things that they've changed in the remix that go beyond just changing the mix, such as adding a guitar solo into Ceiling Unlimited, adding extra backing vocals into the like break part in Secret Touch, I think. And just other little moments throughout the album that they kind of change up things. And sometimes they work in their favor. I'm glad that like Ceiling Unlimited has a guitar solo now, but there's other parts of it that feel very excessive to me. When I think about going back, remixing and revisiting an album, things like making a like delay pattern a little clearer is one thing, but adding in whole new sections can sometimes, I feel, take away a little bit and feel like one version might be superior over the other.
Anything you want to add, Jim, to the end of that?
No, no, very well
Okay.
said.
Okay. Yeah, yeah, okay, that's fine. All right, so on to the next. I figured we'd give you 10 seconds if you wanted to add something to it.
Yeah, that's all right.
All right, so on to the next question. We got two more here. Both of these records have their fair share of deep cuts. What we as hardcore Rush fans or even just fans of music in general would consider deep cuts, right? What do you believe is the deepest cut from your album, and why do you enjoy it? And should give each person 1 minute each so that they can give their own opinion on what they are. So, we started
I'll
with
do a
Vapor Trails,
10-second
so
countdown on each minute.
that's fine. So we'll start with the Test for Echo team on this one. So Ryder or Jim, take it away.
Okay, I guess I'll start. All right, so I think on Test for Echo, there's a lot of deep cuts to choose from because there's not many that are really popular, right? But for me, the one that sits kind of pretty much right in the middle is Totem, and I'm gonna choose that. It's great. I mean the back and forth on the drums from the Niels Tom work that he's doing, just playing beats is really good. Strangely, Alex's guitar sits a little bit further back in the mix. It's not like really up front. And I think with the song that works really, really well. And like if that guitar wasn't there, it'd be like there's a major hole. This thing sounds empty, and you would really be missing it a lot. Um, and the blend of the bass and guitar is perfect. And Neil's hi-hat work at around 322 is nothing short of amazing. Every time I hear it, I picture it.
Ryder?
All right, so my pick for the deep cut on Test for Echo is going to be Time in Motion. I've already gushed about the intro, the swirling guitar. I love all that stuff. But looking even further beyond that, it's such a display of the band's musical talent. Like we said earlier, there's still a lot that the band has to offer right now. And I feel like there's moments in this song that you can especially see Neil's growth as a drummer. And along with that, his lyrics are at the top of their game right here. I think some of the lines here, like lives connect in webs of gold and razor wire, are just super, super brilliant. And how Getty delivers them, his vocal delivery is amazing. I love the super dense harmony layering that's in here. You can very like distinctly hear each vocal line, and it just clashes against each other in a really cool way. I just think that the song has a lot to offer, and especially for people who don't think that Rush had any sort of prog in their later years, check this out.
All right, Vapor Trails team. Both of these records have their fair share of deep cuts. What do you think is the deepest cut from your album, and why do you enjoy it? 1 minute each.
So I think similar to Test for Echo, like Jim was saying, there's a lot of songs on Vapor Trails that were not that popular, so there's a lot to choose from. For me, I'm gonna go with Freeze. It's one of my absolute favorite songs off the album. I think, throughout the verses, it's an odd time signature. It's very driving. And then when you get to the chorus, it just opens way up. It's one of those, big whoa moments. It's like it goes down to halftime maybe, and it just really hits you in the face that this is the chorus. Of course, it's part four of the Fear trilogy, which is always, very cool and makes so much sense. And Bicycle Legs, if you haven't, seen his channel, check it out. Bicycle Legs. When I did his Vapor Trails review with him, this is the one song that he connected with off of Vapor Trails. He wasn't a big fan of the rest of it, but this is the one he said, this sounds like early Rush. So that was an interesting perspective. Great song. Breeze.
All right, Alex.
For me, I would have to refer to it as Nocturne. Uh, that's kind of, in my opinion, it's kind of a double agent, time and motion sort of song that I could see a lot of individuals thinking is a little weird. Too bad for them. I love the intro as far as Neil's drums with the reverse reverb. And reaching back, I feel like with what Neil went through following, not playing for years after having reworked his drumming, I feel that brought him in as Neil. So I feel like the drums right away. Of course, as a guitar player, I love the fact that they have that big buildup. They drop down in the verse. Then there's this little bit of kind of an interlude before the chorus kicks in, where Leifson really kicks in some scream as far as harmonics are going, which is something he began with time and Test for Echo and brought it in for the rest of their career. That's a song that definitely benefited from the 2013 remix, where it really, as I say, opened it up. Big song.
All right. Sounds good. So, as we come to the end of the debate here, I'd like to hear the closing thoughts of each one of you. Tell us why your album is more preferable. And we'll start. Let's just go in chronological order. We'll start with the Test for Echo team. You'll each have 1 minute again, or 2 minutes total.
Ryder, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure, I'll take it away.
Yeah,
So,
cool.
all in all, kind of looking at Test for Echo, um, it's a very interesting album for Rush, because it comes at a very interesting transition period. Obviously, they couldn't have predicted what would come later on, but coming out of the 90s, they're still developing their idea, coming out of this like kind of jazzier poppy era and moving into their heavier section again. And I think this album really has a strong focus on just strong songwriting, a lot of very strong hooks and great musical ideas here. It's a very approachable record. I feel a lot of people can kind of get into this one a lot easier, but that doesn't mean that there's not a lot that this album has to offer. Lyrically, this album is very rich, and there's still a lot of great musical talent on display here. And I think Test for Echo kind of shows everything that Rush has learned in the 90s, kind of all coming together at this peak. And I just think it's a very strong album all around.
Yep. All right. You know, I I've always thought the Test for Echo rocked, and there's some excellent musical moments on there. I mean, you got a bass solo on the album. How cool is that? I don't think we've had that since Hold Your Fire. I think that was the last time Getty did a bass deal. Alex is playing the mandala. That's an instrument that I don't think he's played on record before this album. Neil's sitting slightly behind the beat because of his studies with Freddie Gruber, and that's created a heavier sounding groove, even in those sort of mid-tempo rockers. The groove still sounds really heavier, and there's tons of subtlety all over this album musically, and the compositions are really interesting. I still think that Vapor Trails is an excellent album, and it's got some amazing moments. Sweet Miracle is one of them. Sorry, Eric. But I think Test for Echo is more musically diverse. It gives Alex a lot of time to shine. Plus, it has an instrumental. You could never go wrong with having an instrumental.
All right. Well, we'll cross that instrumental bridge here momentarily. So why don't we give them 2.5 minutes and let them give their closing thoughts and also touch on the lack of instrumental on Vapor Trails. Tell us why that's a good or a bad thing, I guess. So give them 2.5 minutes, let them rebut that, and then give their closing thoughts.
You want to go, Alex?
Sure. I would say that I don't necessarily look at it as a good or a bad thing that there was no instrumental. It's probably just simply the fact that Neil had quite a bit to say, understandably so. Um, they came back after a break. A break is a good thing. Obviously, Neil had his studies with Freddie. So, like I was saying a couple minutes ago, Neil is changed on multiple levels. So it's a new Neil, but it's the old Neil. Lifeson did use Mandola on his solo album Victor, so he had brought in a lot of instrumentation. Well, that's what I do. He brought in a lot of his own instrumentation and production techniques, which because of the Mandola, because of just feeling a need to rock again, there's an awful lot of 16th note riffing on Vapor Trails, which just brings in a certain energy and power, which could also be, hey, it's just like a big ball of fire. And certainly Geddy being Geddy. Geddy had his solo album not long before they began recording Vapor Trails, so they kind of had a new sense of who they were at that point in time, and they had quite a bit to say.
Yeah, I agree with everything Alex said. To piggyback on the instrumental piece, I believe Peaceable Kingdom started with the intention of being instrumental. And then after the events of 9/11, we've got lyrics there. They fit with Peaceable Kingdom. So I think it's purely incidental. I don't think there's much to make of that. But overall, Vapor Trails, it's a very high energy album. Very compelling vocal melodies, very powerful personal lyrical content, like I touched on before. And I'm going to end with this. After the Test for Echo tour, they played Driven and Resist on the Vapor Trails tour, and then they played Resist on R30. Never played anything off of Test for Echo again. After the Vapor Trails tour, they played Earthshine, One Little Victory, Secret Touch on R30, Secret Touch, One Little Victory on Snakes and Arrows, and then One Little Victory in How It Is on R40, which is their career retrospective saying these are our most important songs. Did not play a single thing from Test for Echo. So I will wrap with that.
Well played.
I think they just forgot to add it to the set list.
They didn't play any songs from Power Windows either, I don't think so.
This is true. Yeah.
Oh, are you trying to drag me into this now? Is that what we're doing?
Little.
Hey, I'm trying to get as many people on my side. You're usually
That's
my
right.
Test for Echo defender. Now you're in this objective position. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, now you're swaying me away from it after that dig. I mean, so Alex touched on this. I know I already asked for your closing thoughts, but I want to bring this up because I do think it adds some value to this, because we touched on this throughout all the deep dives, and that's cover art, cover art or album artwork or sleeve design or whatever you want to say, right? So I don't know how to word this because this is completely off, organically right now, but I guess how valuable do you think the cover art was to your specific album? And tell us why, I guess the job that Hugh Syme did on both of them, the job that Hugh Syme did on yours is better or more representative of the album than it would be your opponent's. Who wants to go first? That's I'm kind of just throwing that out there. Whichever team would like to go first. I mean, I know it's kind of a loaded question and it's completely off the cusp, but
I'll chime in because it's what I'll do. And luckily, Paul has them up there since they dropped my Vapor Trails book. Obviously, Blue is I was actually gonna. Oh, it was Test for Echo I dropped. Okay, hold that back up. So obviously, blue is a common color. Blue is serene. The idea of it being in kind of a open space of a snowy north with sort of possibly distant early warning stations. It takes on a sense of serenity, which isn't bad in and of itself. But by that time, they're putting out an album that was kind of ostensibly meant to rock, and it did. But at the same time, too, I felt like they kind of undermined a little bit of the rock with that imagery and certain other aspects of the album. Whereas with Vapor Trails, I mean, there's this foreboding darkness as far as the black, the red, the white. They kind of served it up with a sense of this is coming in hot. we're not messing around at this point. We're back. You're going to hear about it.
Okay, Eric, you want to add anything to that?
I don't have a ton to say other than to say that when I was looking at the Test for Echo cover art on my little phone, the little picture that pops up, I thought it was the Inukshuk on a beach. And when I found out that it was in the snowy Arctic tundra, I was very disappointed because I hate the cold. So that's all I have to say about that.
Okay, Test
What
for
a
Echo.
deep introspective look at the artwork of Hugh Syme.
Yes.
Which wasn't
We'll
one
have
of
to-
you? Were one of you
we'll
on
have
the
to talk
Test
to him
for Echo
about it.
deep dive? It was Ryder. So
I was, yeah.
you were there when we talked about cover art and what
Mhm.
actually it means and how he did it, how Hugh Syme did it. So why don't you go first? Tell us
Yeah.
how it's valuable and what it means to the album.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously this, as we've talked about, there's this whole theme of like communication in the album. And one thing Neil talked about a lot is kind of just like even just in terms of communication, like sending a message out into the world, like, is anybody out there? And this image of just this of this stone in Nukshuk just in the middle of this Arctic tundra, and the only people there are the three that are climbing on there on up this statue, which is really funny because you can think of that as the band members, which I really like that interpretation of it. But standing in this just vast open wasteland, if you look at the TV promos for the album when they came out, it's the same thing of just sending out these signals into these vast snowy wastelands. And I feel like the theming of that is very, very cool when you think about the rest of the album. And I think the Vapor Trails art's really cool. You have this fireball just flying through, very fits with the music. But I think that just for the theming of the album and especially that sending it into nowhere, I really like the cover for that purpose.
Jim?
I don't really have a whole lot to add, but I do agree with Ryder. I mean, the cover art really does fit the album theme, right? The communication, you see the satellites in the background, especially on the back of the album, and the Inukshuk is very, very cool. I mean, I think the Vapor Trails cover art is great, and I think I can't remember what you guys said it, during the debate. It's like a big ball of fire, like the album is itself is, or one of the songs you were talking about. I will agree with that for sure, right? And the album art is cool, but I just think the way that the Test for Echo art fits the album is pretty perfect.
All right. Paul, anything you want to add as host? You've been keeping time and I guess listening. Any organic off the top questions you want to throw at them now, or you think we're good?
I did come up with one quick organic question. And if you guys, I'm not going to time it, just throw something out here because I believe at least one person from each team saw the tours. So whoever wants to take it first, team-wise, what's something that your album's tour or live show happened during it that made it stand out from your opponents? So if one of you, or if you saw it on video, that also counts.
I
That's a
got
really
one.
good question. Yep.
I got one too.
For Vapor Trails,
Go ahead.
I mean, yes, I saw both tours. Two of the things that were really distinctive for Vapor Trails that stood out. I mean, I saw Test for Echo in an outdoor venue, and I saw Vapor Trails indoors, which is my preference. For Vapor Trails, two of the things that were standoutish were when they began the synth for 2112. This one much older guy jumped on the back of the seats and was screaming his head off. But that's a totally different album. Specific to Vapor Trails, when they began midway through, I think it was for the return off of their short break.
Yeah.
They came in with one little victory.
Yeah.
And they had the pyro set up on the stage. And I wasn't close, but I wasn't far back, and that was freaking hot. Literally, physically, you felt those flames.
Yeah.
That was no joke. That was, and obviously that's been welded in my head since 2002.
This came up in conversation between Ryan and I. That's actually why I asked the question. So,
and it's interesting, like you said about that, Alex, because if you look at the DVD of the Clockwork Angels tour, when they got the big pyro, the fire going up at the end of Carney's, you see Neil leaning forward, like almost into his drums to try to get away from the heat. Yeah, because we know how hot that stuff is.
Yeah, I thought, how hot is it on stage?
Oh my gosh, I cannot even imagine how hot it is there. But for me, the thing that stands out for the Test for Echo tour itself. And for some reason, well, it was outside, and for some odd reason, Rush liked to play outdoor venues in Dallas in the middle of summer. I was like, oh, guys, please go inside. Please get the air conditioning. But they were outside. But the Test for Echo tour was the first time that they had no opening band. It was billed as an evening with Rush. And I think that was actually stated on the ticket, an evening with Rush. And I've seen every single tour from Signals to R40 with the exception of R30. I was on a business trip and I'm still mad about that. Um, and while it was nice to have some opening bands, and some of the opening bands I really, really loved, it was a special treat to have an evening with Rush.
They also played all of 2112.
This is true. They also
was
played
waiting for that.
2112
I was
in its
expecting you to
Just
say
entirety.
saying.
Yeah, in the
Just
enti- yeah,
saying.
good point.
I'm
Just
glad
saying.
he didn't lead with
Yeah.
it though, but yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Yeah. There's
But Test for
What?
Echo doesn't have a Russian Rio, so
well, that's just because
Clockwork
they
Angels tour
decided
doesn't have a
to.
Russian Rio either.
yeah, but
Yeah.
Russian Rio is awesome.
That's
Clockwork Angels
true.
tour has a rush in Dallas. That's what Clockwork Angels tour has.
Yeah. Russian
we should just have
Dallas.
Ryder and Eric just fight it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just cage
The
In
next-
the red corner, in the blue corner.
The part 2 of this debate is literally just
Part
going to be a
2.
fist fight.
Yeah. Come out in the boxing shorts or get the boxing gloves.
We'll bring
my
out
Until
God.
I get on
cameras
one.
to set this up
About a
Chili's parking lot.
fisticuffs.
Yeah.
Man. All right. Well, viewers,
Uh,
viewers of this, of course, those that have been in the live chat, leave your thoughts. What who you think won? Again, not which album you like more, but who made the better points for their album. I personally think both teams did a fantastic job, even on the questions that were on the spot. You guys all did very good. And then, yeah, I mean, I think next week, the all female panel that we did a few weeks back had such great response that we're bringing those 5 ladies back for another episode. So should be a fun one. And like I
Awesome.
had mentioned in a roundtable a couple weeks ago, we're kind of on like a sort of break here, so the content's not going to be flowing as much as normal, but we've got a couple roundtables in between. So we'll be back. When we come back, we'll come back with a bang, just as Rush did with Vapor Trails. We'll start with One Little Victory song discussion, and that'll probably be sometime at the end of April or beginning of May. So we will see you all then. And yes, keep an eye out for a poll on our YouTube channel on on which team you think won the debate. Thanks, everybody. See you.